and welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Lowell, and I'm here with my co-host, Jamie.
Hi, everybody.
And today we have with us as a guest, Dan Brown, who is a regular Gauntlet player and also a game designer. And I had the opportunity just last month to play in his Belonging Outside Belonging game of the pack. We're very lucky to have you on the show. Thank you for coming, Dan.
It's my great pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so excited to have Dan on the show.
Oh, absolutely. So what we're going to be doing today in this program is we talk about the games that we played in the past month. In this case, we're going to be talking about sessions from October. In our first segment, we'll be saying what we played and picking one of those games to talk a little bit about in depth. Jamie, let's start with you. Tell us about how your October was and what you want to talk about in specific.
Off the Gauntlet, I got to play Like Bind Returning Home, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, Neon City 2099. That was really fun. That was for the RollCon charity event. It was very thirsty, very swordy, very lesbian-y. Good times.
Now, I have to ask, is that you have a stretch goal for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, right? Is that the setting you're doing?
Oh, no, actually, this one was already part of the... I was one of the core creators that was asked to come on from the start, so that's really cool. And actually, it's been a really great experience working with April and Evil Hat in general. One of my favorites is the Scoundrel Playbook. The key art for the Scoundrel Playbook features the Philippine inks, so that was super cool. They asked me to help out with putting together pre-colonial fashion for the Filipino Scoundrel. They look really, really good.
Oh, very cool. I interrupted you. I just wanted to check in on that.
And I also got to play Off the Gauntlet 2 different games of Apocalypse Keys going on at the same time. So on the actual play stream and also with the Gauntlet folks, including Lowell and a few others. So I stole some Gauntlet people to have an ongoing playtest for Apocalypse Keys. That's been really fun. And on the Gauntlet, I got to play Brinkwood Refuge, which I talked about last time. That was a lot of fun. And more Apocalypse Keys. Actually, if you look at my calendar, it was like Apocalypse, like 3 in a row.
That seems appropriate for the season right now.
I know, it feels like it. We're all finding our ways to get through this. And I also got to play Teenage Nightmare, which is the game I'm going to be talking about today.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so Teenage Nightmares is really, really cool. It's not officially released. It is basically Monster Hearts 2 by way of Belonging Outside Belonging. And Avery Alder is currently working on Teenage Nightmare. This second version of Teenage Nightmare was released through the Goblin Friendship Club in June 2020. You can find more about the Goblin Friendship Club at buriedwithoutceremony.com. And in case you're not familiar with Monster Hearts and what it's about, it is a game about the messy lives of teenage monsters, about secrets and discovery. It explores the terror of having a body that is changing without your permission. The monstrosity of these characters is literal. They are vampires, werewolves, witches, and more. But their monstrosity is also allegorical, standing in for experiences of alienation, shame, queerness, and self-destruction. I think that's Monster Hearts is definitely one of the classic PBTA games. Mm-hmm. It really did a lot to change the landscape, I think. I feel like after Apocalypse World, I personally feel like it's Monster Hearts that did the next big, huge shift in PBTA for me.
Agreed.
So it's really cool to see it now in this Belonging Outside Belonging structure. So what definitely worked for me is the game feels really fresh and amazing through the BOB structure. I really love seeing how Avery broke down each iconic playbook into weak, regular, and strong moves. So since Avery helped start BOB in the first place, this feels especially significant. I love seeing her perspective on what constitutes a weak move, what constitutes as a character choice you make in the beginning, how she decided to break down the threats you can create and the map and the setting elements, which I'll talk about in a bit. So I got to play with some amazing people, including Daryl Ross, who we had on the show recently, and Daryl made an amazing character keeper that's both really beautiful, really helpful. The safety tab has this extensive list of lines and veils that are normally associated with the young adult horror genre, and it automates the colors. So if you pick something to be a veil, blink, it turns it into this faded shade of red, and then if you choose a line, pink, it's this huge shade of red. It's really, really good stuff. When I finally go back to playing in person, I'm really going to miss character keepers. It's going to feel like playing with the missing.
True, I agree.
Like, it's just really, I don't know how I lived without a character keeper. Even though the first time I looked at a character keeper, I was like, what is this finagledness? But now it's like breathing. One of my favorite things we do often is we'd have one person playing their PC and then the other two would co-GM and take a different setting element each. And that was super fun. That's really something that can only exist in the traditional BOB structure. After town and character generation, we hit the ground running. There was lots of horror, intimacy, teen angst. It was fantastic. It was very, very sexy, which is really good. And the setting elements that Avery put together are a lot of fun. They're not what I expected. There's definitely like an Abyss setting element because the Abyss is so important in Monster Hearts. But our favorite was social media. So that definitely feels like a setting element in real life, right?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I feel like we're so affected by social media. So the description for it is, all moments and places are connected. There are endless audiences, exclusive channels, and instant rewards. Everything you could ever want. But at what price? What are you willing to do for a heart reactor lucky star? Once shared, a secret has no boundaries. Once viral, a story has no master. Trust is temporary. Betrayal is forever. I felt like it really grabbed the horror from the teen perspective of what social media is, which is like absolutely good.
So it sounds like you didn't play with a GM. You were playing GM-less.
Right. Like, as everybody knows, I love playing GM'd BOB games, but this one we really decided to go at it GM-less, and I felt like it really worked really well. I think maybe it's because enough of the players were really familiar with the genre. Like, we've watched enough CW shows and we've watched enough teen horror things and read enough of the books that it was easy for everybody to be on the same page, I think, maybe. But I would like to see this with the GM, I'm going to say. So.
And these are all players who'd played Belonging Outside Belonging before, right?
Yeah.
That always feels to me like as I've gone on and played it, I felt more comfortable. I think it is a game with a real learning curve in some ways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really think that's the case with BOB. I think what really made it work for us was everyone was really comfortable with stepping up and being a GM in the moment and co-GMing at the same time. Like, there wasn't any hesitation. And I think that's really essential in order to pull off BOB GM-less really well. Like, if there's a lot of hesitation, if there's like a lot of back and forth, it's so easy to kill the momentum of the game. And this one, we would only discuss very briefly the start of the scene and then just jump into it. Like, it really flowed really, really well, I thought.
So it's still an early draft, as I understand. It's still in process. But are there things you were less certain about?
There are a few things I'm less sure about. So in most BOB games, you spend the first session setting up the game, and playing just 3 sessions to wrap up a story can really feel like it's not enough. This is probably different with other groups and playstyles, but this has always been the case for me. I felt like we couldn't get it any shorter. Like, we tried to go through card gen and the setting elements and the map as quickly as possible, and it still took the full 3 hours of game time. So, and the thing with BOB, right, is like you set up all of these threads and you set up all of these ideas, and then it's so hard to pull them back together in time.
Yeah.
Because there isn't just one GM who can like forcibly draw these threads together. So that's definitely a thing. And while I really love the BOB format and the fresh lens, I did miss the Monster Heart moves. So, you know, for example, only some of the playbooks have access to the turn someone on, and I feel like the essential truth of Monster Hearts is anybody can turn someone on at any time, whether they mean to or not, which is what I like about the game. But in BOB, we were looking at it. I mean, we were still being very sexy, mind you, but no one officially had that move. For example, in this current version of the game, only some playbooks have access to it. Mainly the Mortal and the Werewolf have it as a regular move. And only the Witch, which is what I was playing, only the Witch has access to the shut someone down move. No one else does. So That feels very, like you can't help but miss it. But then I don't know if I would like it if everybody had the moves necessarily. So I still want to play some more and see how it feels, because I don't think the point is to say which Monster Hearts version is better. I just really want to see how Teenage Nightmare sings on its own. I want to play it to the point where I'm not really thinking about the original material so much anymore. And the last thing I'm not so sure about is, much like the original Monster Hearts, this is a game that requires players to buy into the premise and play to the strengths and tropes of this sexy and emotional genre. So I understand Monster Hearts can be scary for some people because it's a very intense and sexy game. But I think if you play with people, I feel like it's really easy to play in the Gauntlet, for example, because we have our safety tools in place and all of that. But I feel like it's just, you have to come in with ready to be sexy and not be creepy. And just go for it.
Do you feel like this flavor of Monster Hearts forces people to lean into that more, or asks people to lean into that more than the original Monster Hearts, or is it sort of...
Oh, you know what? I think the BOB version is gentler about it because, for example, there's no sex move. I think when I played Monster Hearts, everyone's just sort of like, the sex move is staring at everybody in the original version. Like people are like, I'm not looking at that part of the playbook. Like, I could really feel that when I was first running the game. In the BOB version, there are no sex moves. It's nowhere there. So there's like some form of sexiness, like in terms of like turning someone on or whatever, but it's not built into it. So I wonder if Avery did that on purpose. Like, the sexiness is like in between the lines, but it's only there if you want to participate. I wonder if it's a way to be more welcoming to like aromantic or asexual characters and players.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point though. Like, it really felt different. It feels, so even though Teenage Nightmare is just as sexy, it doesn't feel as intimidating, I think, to the average person with that sexiness.
You're right. See, it's so built into the DNA of it that in Monster Hearts 2 that it is a little off-putting for people who would prefer to be aromantic. That's one of the comments I had for Hearts of Lin in this, is figuring out ways to make the romantic entanglements, change them around, or at least give statements that people can do that, so that it's not always putting pressure that way.
Yeah, and I understand. Like, I'm someone who's asexual, but I enjoy playing sexual characters, if that makes sense. I don't think they're really sexual because I don't know how to really think like a sexual person, but I like to pretend. But I also understand wanting to play a character that isn't into those things. I understand wanting to play a character who's more like you, especially if you're aromantic, right? Like, if you don't operate on that level, if you don't see the world that way, it can feel really awkward to have to force that. So I do like how games are getting better at providing more avenues for people to express themselves.
Some of the feedback I got on the BOB game that I've been working on is it would be cool if there was sort of almost a modular aspect to it. So if we select a certain kind of setting at the beginning, it unlocks a set of moves that could be available to everyone. So I can see that happening. I mean, it makes the game more complex, but it also, I think, maybe empowers players, especially ones who are sort of where the power dynamic is even on the table.
Yeah.
To kind of buy into I want to play this more dark, or I want to play this more goofy or more sexy.
Yeah. Wow, that is such a good idea. I love the idea of modular BOB.
So your overall takeaway about this?
If you're a fan of the genre or Monster Hearts, I definitely recommend checking out this version of the game. You can find it on the Gauntlet Hangouts. It's like there if you want to listen to people being very teenagery, very sexy, very horror-y. There's a lot of good fun.
Dan, why don't you tell us about your October and what you want to talk about?
Off Gauntlet, I played Agon with my home group. I started a Dungeon World campaign with my younger son and his friends. He's 9, so a bunch of 9 and 10.
Oh, good.
And then my family group, we play just me and my wife and my 2 kids. We're playing Hearts of Wulin Supernatural,
Yes,
which has been fantastic. My wife refuses to play any other role-playing game besides.
because it's so good. It's so good.
So good. It hit all the right notes for her.
Awesome.
On Gauntlets, October was great because we had the Gauntlet community open gaming. So I was able to squeeze in a couple of other games. I played in Lowell's Brindlewood Bay on Sundays and play tested a game that I'm working on called The Pack, which is about a group of domestic dogs who wake up one day to find all the humans are gone. So a post-apocalyptic world of domestic dogs and maybe a cat or two.
Yeah.
And then I designed a game that was sort of an homage to Gamma World from the 70s and 80s.
Nice.
Called World of Gamma, and it was a submission to the one-page RPG jam. We just did a one-shot during the Gauntlet Community Open Gaming. That worked really well. And then the other one-shot that I did during Gauntlet Community Open Gaming is called My Partner the Ghost, which is a game that Sam Zimmerman and I have been working on. And it's a flavor of a game that I designed last year called Packing Heat. And this is the game that I will talk about in more detail.
Okay.
So this game is called My Partner the Ghost, and the premise is that there's a human investigator, maybe a PI, who has a partner in investigating stuff, and that partner happens to be a ghost. The game is specifically designed for 2 players and 1 GM. I think I did that because I have 2 children, and often it's just the 3 of us who want to play.
Oh, that's so cute, though.
Yeah. So I'm not sure this is the game for them, but we're getting there. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and the kind of central premise is that it's a focus on the relationship between these 2 people, or person and ghost. So in My Partner the Ghost, one plays a ghost, the other plays the investigator, and the backbone of this game is, I think of this as kind of a meter that measures the attunement between the 2 characters, how aware the human is of the ghost and how well the ghost can communicate or interact with the material world. So we start out the game with very low attunement, which means maybe the human can sort of pick up a sense of the ghost being there. Maybe the ghost can kind of transmit emotional feelings, but not much else. And then as their attunement gets higher, the ghost can do more. I think I'm going to talk about this more in depth in a moment, so I'll put that aside for now. Attached to that meter is what I call kind of collaboration styles, or in this case, manifestation styles, like how capable they are of working well together. So in the early stages of their relationship, they maybe can't do as much in sync with each other. And in later stages, they can do more in sync with each other. The main moves to get stuff done in this game involve using the team's attunement score. So the individual characters don't have attributes. Instead, they have a joint attribute of their attunement score. When you roll any of the investigation style moves, you're rolling with that attunement score. I'm old, so my touch point for this was the movie Ghost, which came out in 1990, which starred Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. Demi Moore was the human, and Patrick Swayze was the ghost. And over the course of this movie, Patrick Swayze as a ghost gets better at communicating with Demi Moore.
I have to bring that up just really quick because, like, I was playing a game with some people like a few months ago about Ghost, and I was like, yeah, you know, it's like Ghost, the movie with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, and everyone gave me these blank looks, and I was like, the movie is not that old, and I looked it up. Oh, 1990 was kind of like a long time ago, but it's so good. It's a good movie.
It's great.
There's actually a K-drama series on Netflix right now.
Oh.
With a young man who's sort of an exorcist, and there's this ghost that he runs into, and together they fight ghosts.
Oh, cute.
It's really good, like, because it's super romantic.
So I was able to playtest this in Gauntlet Community Open Gaming. Will was one of my playtesters, and Steven was the other, and I was just super fortunate to have those 2 there embody their characters in ways that I am envious of. Here's what worked really well, I think, about the game. At the outset, the characters kind of decide what relationship they have. So if we're doing the movie Ghost, that was a romantic relationship. Maybe they worked together, so they had a professional relationship. Or maybe there was a mentorship relationship. So I've got 6 different kinds of relationships that you can choose. And that's the first choice you make in developing your characters. You then decide who's going to be the human and who's going to be the ghost. And that really led to some good conversation. Steven raised a concern that, you know, the ghost, if they can't interact much with the material world, Are they just, I think he used the term set dressing, like, are they just sort of in the background? I'm really glad that he brought that up at the beginning, because then through developing their characters, we thought more deeply about how can Stephen's ghost kind of play a role in Will's humans world. So that discussion was really, really valuable. This game is sort of an evolution of two previous iterations of this game. And so I had come to understand that although I wanted the characters to focus on these collaboration moves, these attunement moves that they did together, that there was a need in the narrative often to have individual moves. And I thought the players did a good job telling a story that involved both of these things, so we could really see both of them in action. The moves are fairly broad, but the individual move is just simply get it done. That's the name of the move. And it's when you act alone to further an investigation, to overcome a threat or an obstacle, or to discover a clue, describe your goal, and then you roll minus the amount of stress that you've accumulated over time. So to get around this idea of everyone needing their own attribute scores or what have you, there are other ways in which that we can resolve some of those things. Sam brought in to this game kind of this cool mechanism of leads and clues. So over the course of the investigation, the players generate leads, which take the form of a question. So during hours, it was on a college campus, and one of the questions was, why had the victim come to work early that day? And so that became the impetus for their investigation. It was my role then as the GM to provide an answer to that question at some point, and that became a clue. So a lot of the moves, the investigation moves, kind of involve this economy of generating a question and then answering the question with a clue, and then using that clue in the course of doing more investigation. So there's really this nice give and take there. And then I'm going to talk more about the attunement moves shortly, but I just felt like these worked great. I really tried to build them so there are a lot of prompts in them to get people to talk about how do you work together and how do you work within the constraints of the nature of your relationship at the moment, which might be that as a ghost, all you can do is transmit feelings to the other person. What does that look like? And what does that feel like on the screen?
Wow, I'm really getting the ghost vibes though. That's really cool. Like when Whoopi Goldberg was like overcome with love and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's sort of like during the game, we introduced an NPC who was a former flame of Will's human character and was the object of Stephen's ghost character's interest. He had a crush on this person when he was alive. So there was this really interesting mix of feelings that were emerging where Will's character was like, well, we've moved on. And yet Stephen's character was like, wow, I kind of wish I were still alive so I could hang out with this person. So I really appreciated just how much they leaned into that and how much tension we were able to generate with just that. And Will did such a good job being like, wait, why am I feeling like this? So it worked great. It really worked well. So because this is a game in playtest, there's always things to work on. And this is my favorite part of the design process, is just watching people play the game, get swept up with the game, but also being able to observe, like, I bet if I tweaked it this way, we can have even more fun. Stress is kind of the main pressure, mechanical pressure that the characters feel. I don't know if this is just my GMing style or if it was a mechanical problem with the game, but the stress just did not accumulate quickly enough. So a way of doing that. It is meant to apply some pressure, and it's crucial to this attunement meter because if you accumulate enough stress, your relationship takes a setback, right? And so there's this kind of important mechanism that influences the narrative of you're working together, you're working better, and then you've done so much stuff that creates stress that your relationship takes the hit.
Right, and handling that balance sounds like something to keep looking at, like you said, because it might be a GM style thing, less of a mechanical thing.
Yeah. Like if you're making a game about investigators or superheroes, like the poop needs to hit the fan at some point. Like you just feel it. So,
right.
In order to kind of create some more narrative prompts, I sort of very liberally borrowed Brindlewood Bay's crowns mechanism. We call them history.
Ooh, I love that mechanism.
Yeah, I love it too. And I love that it's kind of a limited resource and that it encourages the players to talk about their characters. We brought that in because there's really no other way to buff or roll. So if players do get a bad roll and they want to bump it up, this gives them a means to do that. But because of this, we got carried away writing these histories. So characters have many of them, and they just kind of kept checking them off. Like, oh, I'm just going to hit another history, which was great. We learned a lot about their characters, but also meant that prevented them from getting stress. So that was off. I really like Brenda Woodbay's options for the crowns. I mean, the questions are perfect. They're tiny, but they're perfect. And there's one set of crowns in Brenda Woodbay that has some fairly clear negative consequences for using them. And I'd really like to incorporate that into My Partner the Ghost. And then when I talked to the players at the end of the play test, both of them felt like the leads and clues thing was a little awkward. The economy didn't work quite well. Sam listened to the game and made some tweaks to it. So now I think it's smoothed things out a little bit, so there's not quite as much relying on good rolls. So the players can basically generate leads at any time. A lead, remember, is a question that they're asking. And then whether they get a clue on that lead or not is dependent on the rolls and the moves that they make. I'm hopeful that creates some more pressure on the team. So yeah, so still plenty to kind of noodle on this game. And when I was trying to think about how to describe this game, I coined the term ecto-noir.
So good. Delicious.
It's a great name.
I feel like
Great
you can
name.
eat that name.
Yes. Ecto-Noir Cooler. Awesome. So my October was pretty good. Off Gauntlet, we did about my Hearts of Wulin, my face-to-face game that swapped over to that. I did the Session 0 for an adaptation of 7th Sea to a variation of the D6 system. Playing 13th Age, which is our trad game, and then we continue to play Star Trek Express. And then on Gauntlet for GCOG, I ran Masks and Brindlewood Bay, both as one-shots, which were great. Really, really good. The Masked one was dynamite. It hit all the beats I wanted it to. And then I played Mork Borg, which is OSR, and it was pretty fun. It's goofy, dumb, metal fun, and there's some cute mechanics in it. And then I played Tears of the Machine, SC. So on Gauntlet, I played Fate of Cthulhu, I ran Brindlewood Bay, I played Shattered City, and I played the Pack, and I am the person who missed the last session of the Pack because I was sick, which I was super sad about because it was really fun. I had a great character, a Dalmatian with a jaunty little fireman's cap. He was a himbo dog.
Oh, perfection.
So
perfection.
It was really, really good.
We did have to narrate what happened to Sparky.
Okay.
Sparky went off to trade with the Dolphin pod. We felt like the best ambassador to interact with the Dolphins.
So cute.
So good. But the game I want to talk about is Fate of Cthulhu for a couple of reasons. Now, this is a standalone version of Fate Core, and it is slightly slimmed down from the base Fate Core. And it's, of course, about battling the Cthulhu mythos, which is classic. You know, we've seen this in Trail of Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu, all these Lovecraftian games over the years. So the twist here is that the mythos is already won. The world has already been destroyed in some particular way. And what we play is a group of people who are trying to stop it from occurring because some of the players pay time travelers from the future, come back, and some of the players play characters in this time. So we know what the apocalypse is going to be, and historians have some information on what the flashpoints are. So this is much more the Terminator than it is actually straight Lovecraftian horror.
Ooh, I was gonna ask like Terminator, or I was also thinking like X-Men Days of Future Past. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. It's all of that kind of thing. There's always a debate about various systems on the Gauntlet. Some people like some systems, and some people don't. Fate has been a long contentious one, and I am one of the people who likes a very particular kind of light-handed Fate, and so I've run Fate a little bit on the Gauntlet. So this game is wild, and I had a really good time with it. I really did. So Cosmic Horror is about that feeling of helplessness and inevitability. I always point to, if anyone's read it, Uzumaki by Junji Ito, which is striking Japanese horror manga that is brilliant, But that's one of the things that turns some players off from Call of Cthulhu and horror games. And quite honestly, if there was a Junji Ito or Uzumaki RPG, I would not want to play
I was going to say.
Yeah. And some games work on this. Bluebeard's Bride plays off of a certain sense of inevitability and things. But this takes that sort of cosmic horror Lovecraftian theme and it flips it on its head. It's explicitly about being able to do something about the mythos and explicitly about the idea that it is possible for you to win, which is interesting and very different from the pressure that I think every other Lovecraftian game does, even those that have like a pulp mode where you using machine guns against the mythos. The other thing is you aren't fumbling around in the dark. There are frames of reference. At the start of the game, the GM and the players choose which mythos figure has won. Is it Cthulhu? Is it Shib-Niggurath? Is it Nyarlathotep, which it was in our case? And there's a different history for each one and a different set of flashpoints that the book presents. And we get that information. We get information that the historians have kind of put together from the future. It's not complete, and we have to figure out how to use that. The question is how you actually go there and do a thing. One of the things is you go to these events and you don't just want to stop them. You want to figure out what's going on. You want to use their aspects against them. You want to destroy them. That creates time ripples that will then allow you to make some changes on the timeline and actually change up the sort of the strength of your final opposition and things. For example, I threw a bomb early in the first mission that we did, and that was not the best choice. We stopped the thing, but we absolutely missed on opportunities for information, and it was a really good learning experience. Like after that, we said, okay, we've got to be more careful because we didn't get a victory in that first game.
Ooh.
That put us kind of behind the clock. Some other things I like about it, the game explicitly stresses that Lovecraft was a horrible racist. Even for his time, he was a racist. And it also avoids all of the usual problematic sanity mechanics that we see in a lot of Lovecraftian games. That has changed in recent years, but it's still a thing. And this game explicitly talks about that. Mechanically, Alan Rees ran this, and he runs Fate very much the way I do. Small number of aspects. We don't have a table full of them. We set difficulties instead of rolling. We keep things moving at a clip. There's less focus on the calculations and the fate point economy and having to move things around. Instead, we encounter those rolls, we roll them, and they have a big effect, and then we move on to the next point. And so I really like that because I've played Fate with Fate designers at cons and not had a great experience with that, where they're very mechanical. And so we're stopping on any particular action, and you have to generate X amount of aspects to be able to get through this thing, and did not enjoy that. Whereas at home, I've run it for years, a variation of it. One of the tricks being is I'm not using fate dice. We're using cards at home. And then likewise, Alan wasn't using fate dice. Instead, he's using 2d6, subtract the bad die from the good die. And then you get a result and you add your skill to it. And that felt much better. I mean, it's about the same. It's actually more swinging, I think, but it wasn't fate dice. Because I have come to loathe them. They are never fun for me.
Yeah. I have this huge collection of fate dice that just stares at me because I really thought I would love it because the plus minus blank, it seems really appealing, but
oh yeah, I have a bunch of those. And I've read a lot of Fate, and just when we get to that point, I don't like it. But the central premise of you're competent, and what's happening is how much do you want to pay to get through this moment? Right. Are you willing to take this loss? Are you willing to spend resources to get through? And the calculations are pretty quick, especially once you take out the GM rolling on their side. Once the GM's going X difficulty, Y difficulty, it makes things go so much faster. I've mentioned the fact that there are so many different mythos and timelines. It's a really well-supported game. Evil Hat has done it, by the way. Again, this is a beautiful game. It's well presented. The hardcover is great. It's a done-in-one. The layout is so good, so clean, great use of white space. And once again, they understand how important it is for the art to feel consistent across the sections, and it does. It's really, really good. Those are all the things I like about it. A few things that I'm less sure about. In the game, you have people who are from the present and people who are from the future. And those are the time travelers, obviously. They come in with a slightly different set of things, including the fact that they've already kind of been touched by corruption when they come back.
Delicious.
But the fictional positioning is also very different between the time traveler and the normal person. We ended up starting the game with just one time traveler, and one of the players said that they weren't a time traveler, but their future self had come back and had given them the information before they died.
Oh, dramatic.
So they had seen their future dead self, which was really, really good.
Oh, so good. Okay, sorry. Go
ahead. Oh, yeah, no, it was super. But we only had one time traveler. And the time traveler was really the engine for driving some of the corruption mechanics that occur in the game. So I can't really talk too much about those myself because we didn't see so much of that. We barely got to that. I knew that that's kind of how it worked, but we didn't get to see it. The game has a tighter approach to stunts than my usual philosophy. They've got a very much Mad Lib XY approach, which is fine. It's easy to do. It means bringing somebody new in is good. I like funky stunts from Fate Core and stuff that don't quite hold to the rules, but that's my preference.
Do you mean like closer to like the iHunt stunts? Like that's your preference? Or?
Yeah, iHunt has some wild stunts that you're like, okay, that doesn't quite make sense given how you say stunts are supposed to work, or they kind of hit the borders of things. I like that because stunts for me are like super special, cool talents, and I like them to be meaningful. Otherwise, I'll just keep more fate points. If they're not that cool.
Right.
The game has a big chart of multiple of the different events. I'm putting my hands in the air that you can't see at home. I'm trying to illustrate that there are these charts on these pages with the different events, the different values that go with them, that track the ripples in time and how things are going. That took some getting used to. And it was a while before I had a handle on, okay, these are the choices I need to make to affect that positively.
Oh, right.
It took at least session 2 before I started to get a handle on it. I don't know if I could run this right now. I would have to go back and really reread and probably sit down and outline it. Alan did a great job with it, but I can recognize right now that I don't think I grokked how the game worked as a whole. So that's an interesting thing, because I've played a lot of games and I'm usually pretty good at figuring out the ways around, but it was a challenge. And I think that if someone is going to GM this, they probably need to watch an AP video where they really need to sit down with the outline of here are the things, because what it is there are 4 missions and then a final mission. Each of those missions where you got the information can generate effects that affect the final mission, can change that up.
And it's like set in stone, like this many missions.
Exactly, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
We did it in 5 sessions. I think ideally you would do it in more than that. I think you would do it in like 9 sessions. Give each of the early missions like 2 sessions to give it space to breathe. And then you do a final mission in 1 with the big showdown there. It's a great game. I think Evil Hat has knocked it out of the park again. I would play it again. I would run it with some work on that. I like it. It reinforces everything I dig about the system. Alan Reese is a dynamite GM. If you can play with him on the Gauntlet, I highly recommend it. So those are my takeaways from that. This might be the game I could get Sherry to play that's Cthulhu-esque, because she hates
Oh no, I
hates all that
understand.
Cthulhu
Oh my
stuff.
Gosh, I've been so traumatized by all these Cthulhu games by GMs who set me up to die. Like,
Oh yeah,
I have such a horrible. I still don't talk to that GM. I'm like, we stopped being friends the moment you tricked me into killing myself. But this sounds really good, and I'm so entranced with Fate of Cthulhu, and it's like literal. It's the fate of the world. It's from the future. I don't know. I'm so. But it's also the system. I'm so easily impressed like that. It just sounds great.
So good. So why don't we go to our second segment, which is our guest talking about a topic which Dan has hinted about that we're going to look at in depth for a little bit here.
Hi listeners, Jason from Gauntlet Publishing here. I want to tell you about a couple of new things we have for you this month. The first is Nephews and Peril, a major expansion for Brindlewood Bay, the game of cozy murder mysteries and supernatural horror. Nephews and Peril is a collection of 6 new mysteries for the game, each by a different fabulous author, and some revised rules and gameplay advice. It can be found in the $6 plus Gauntlet Patreon feed until October 15th, and then Drive-Thru RPG after that. The next thing I want to tell you about is Codex Home, the first issue in Volume 5 of the magazine. Codex Home features new material for Trophy Gold and Brindlewood Bay, plus the all-new game Back Again from the Broken Land, which is about fantasy heroes recounting stories as they return home from a calamitous war against a Dark Lord, all while evading the remnants of that Dark Lord's army. It's a fantastic Powered by the Apocalypse game, and we're delighted to share it with you later in October. Remember, your contributions to the Gauntlet Patreon help support everything we do in the community, including this very podcast. As always, thanks so much for your support.
So, Dan, tell us what you want to talk about today.
When you all asked me what I want to talk about, I was like, I don't know. I don't have anything I really talk about or think about. And then I made a list of all the things that I was thinking about. And I was like, oh, I guess I do have one or two things. But one of you, I guess it was Lowell, suggested that I talk more about this kind of trust mechanic in this system. So like I said, this game started out as a buddy cop game for movies from the 80s, like Lethal Weapon and Beverly Hills Cop and movies like that, which were enormously problematic. But what they had at their heart was this arc, and the characters kind of went through this arc together. They were so different. And because of those, let's call them sometimes superficial, sometimes deep-rooted differences, they had to kind of figure out how to trust each other. Buddy cop movies, the first ones were people of two different races, also two different genders, two different socioeconomic backgrounds. We got movies like Turner and Hooch, two different species. We got movies like Alienation, which were a human and an alien teaming up. So all of these are kind of this extended genre. And for better or for worse, as a kid growing up in the 80s, they were a huge part of my childhood. As an adult now, looking back on them, what I realized that I took away from them is this notion of two people can overcome their differences to kind of solve a problem. What does that look like in game format? The game started out with this idea that the differences themselves were mechanized, right? That we sort of decided on exactly what those differences were, and that we were kind of gradually overcoming them. We don't need to kind of harp on the differences when someone is a human and someone is a ghost. The differences are fairly clear, and this kind of growth, this mutual growth that they go through, is far more interesting because it's about the communication between the two of them. So we start out the game by defining the connection between the two, what they have in common, rather than what they have different from each other. And so I think that fits nicely into this idea of trust and building trust over time. In My Partner the Ghost, we call that attunement, just because it fits with the genre better. But I'm working on a revision of Team Up, which is the superhero game, where I use trust again. And as the characters learn to trust each other, the more they trust each other, the better they can work together and the better they can rely on each other. The whole point of these movies and these stories is that the characters start far apart and that they come to rely on each other. So trust is represented, or attunement is represented, as a single attribute score. And you start the game at a -1. And it's powered by the apocalypse. So whenever you're doing an investigate move or a physical move, you roll plus your attunement score. But you need to describe what is the collaboration style that you're using. And I'll get to that in just a sec. But the fact that both characters share this one attribute puts this emphasis on the connection between the two of them, and that each player is kind of mutually benefits from bumping this score up, right? So both are invested in kind of moving this score up, which again is kind of how the movies go, right? We're both invested in, we might not like each other, we might not really understand each other, but we know we need to work together. And so we know we need to kind of build the trust up between us. This made it very easy to kind of ignore or not put too much emphasis on the individual attributes, right? Those became more narrative prompts rather than kind of mechanical things that they needed to do. In the user manual and in the instructions, I did try and make it look like a ladder, right? So you kind of bump up the track of trust. But I also wanted to acknowledge that by moving up this ladder, you're kind of unlocking new ways of working together. As a aside, just dealing with everything that we are dealing with this year, my kids are seeing me and my wife interact in ways that they've never had to see before, right? Sort of dealing with all kinds of things that are going on. And my older son said to us, "You guys are really good in a crisis." And I think what he is seeing is that teamwork that develops over 20 plus years of marriage, that we can do things together now that we wouldn't have been able to do when we first met in our 20s. So that's sort of the framing that I have, is that the greater the trust between the two characters, the more we can work together. So in the original version of this game, Packing Heat, these were I call these collaboration styles. And they started out, you start out as working independently. So maybe you're both working towards the same goal, but you're each working separately towards that goal. And eventually it kind of goes up to working in concert or working together, such that you're both kind of have each other's backs, that you're both kind of making contributions that rely on each other. Those lower levels are kind of just parallel activities. And at the highest level, these are sort of anticipating each other's move, building on each other's actions. I remember watching the first Avengers movie. And by the end of that movie, they've cultivated this kind of teamwork such that they don't even talk about what they're going to do. They just kind of take these actions that rely on each other's abilities. And that was what was in the back of my head as I was thinking about these higher levels of collaboration.
Let me ask a question here. So we've got the ladder. We've talked about it going up. Does the ladder go down? Do people fall back on the ladder? What causes that in the game?
This is such an important part of the genre. This idea of we're going to work together, but then in Act 2, we have a setback, right? And we get to a point in the movie where something tests our relationship. It's kind of like the equivalent of the hero's journey. In the hero's journey, we have the hero getting better, but at some point, their capacity to overcome a threat is tested. The same is true for a relationship. In this case, there's a stress track. As the stress gets higher, or if they have a certain amount of stress and they're directed to mark another stress, that's when the setback happens. It's like the world has put too much pressure on them. And so they've now got to reevaluate their relationship. And there are a set of moves specifically geared for that setback. The collaboration styles themselves, I played a lot with sort of how all of these elements work together. The ladder, the collaboration style, or what we call the manifestation level in My Partner the Ghost, and then the moves themselves. Usually the consequences of a move, like when you have to pick stuff off a list, that's built into the move itself. But we move that list into the collaboration style. So even though I'm using the same move, we call it check it out, right? It's kind of the name of the investigation move. If I fail and I have to pick things from a list, I'm picking from the list in the manifestation style. So there are different impacts depending on how I'm working together. So by way of example, if my partner and I are at the lowest level, all we have is emotional manifestation. That means the ghost can transmit feelings to the investigator and can broadly sense emotions kind of in the space that they're in. If they have to pick from the list because something went wrong, maybe the ghost affects the feelings of someone else, right? So that's one of the possible impacts. If we're working at a higher level of manifestation, we call this sensory manifestation. The investigator can see and hear the ghost, and the ghost can choose to manifest to other living things if they wish. So now the ghost can become kind of fully manifest because we have reached a much higher level of attunement. So the impact from that is that maybe trying to manifest draws energy from the ghost. And so now they have trouble acting because they've required to use a lot of energy for that. So the intent is I may fail the roll or I may miss the roll, but the impact of that depends on the collaboration level.
I like that. Yeah. So you have like different things you're looking at, and it feels like it keeps the game fresh, right? Because you're moving up on that ladder rather than looking at the same move over and over again. That's super cool.
I don't think I've seen it. I haven't seen it this way. Like Masks has its trust is a team pool, but it's a shared pool. It's a currency. And things like, let's say, Night's Black Agents or Smallville, they have sort of similar, well, they have relationships, and they can have a trust mechanic, but they're asymmetrical. which is interesting, but I really like this idea that it is a shared dynamic. I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I wanted to lean so hard into that in every flavor of this game, and especially with my partner, the Ghost, there are no other attribute scores. So the only other thing that I might accumulate is stress, right? And that's kind of the only other numerical aspect to the game, which has been a fantastic design constraint and a design challenge.
Mm-hmm.
With Team Up, I'm experimenting with, there are these power moves that you can mark. The two of them kind of do a super cool power move that's unique to them. And that's sort of taking the place of the Brindlewood Bay marking a crown thing.
Okay.
So again, even with superpowered folks, I was trying to kind of really say, the main number I want you to focus on is collaboration or attunement or trust.
Because like Robin and Batman, it's not about any of their other attributes, really. It's about how well they work together and if Batman can learn to listen to Robin. Anyway, I have very strong superhero feelings. I agree.
Yes. Yeah, that seems, actually, I was thinking about the first arc of Grant Morrison's Batman run is all about trusting one another and learning how to work with each other.
Yeah.
For me, the touchstone is even more recent, the Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie because it's basically a romantic comedy in costumes. It just works so well. And the chemistry between the two of them is so great.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
We know they start out at a very low trust level.
Yeah, so good.
Anything else you want to say about that?
No, I'm honored that it's going to be published. It's been fantastic to collaborate with Sam Zimmerman. He's such a talented...
So good at designing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the way Sam looks at mechanics. He's super good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's move to our final segment. So, listeners, in our final segment, each of us is going to be discussing something that has lately been inspiring us or giving us joy. So, Jamie, what is giving you life?
This has given me life a few times. This is the fourth time. It's Dragon Age Inquisition. It's a video game that I really love. I really love the Mass Effect series and the Dragon Age series. A big secret I have is, even though I play TTRPGs, I don't like the fantasy genre. It's like my big, dirty secret. Yeah, that removes like 80% of like games.
True.
I still play D&D for years, but anyway. But Dragon Age is really good fantasy. Like, it's really, I love it so much. The lore is so good, and this is the third game in the series, Dragon Age Inquisition. I've only played this 3 times compared to the other games in the series. I played the first one and the second one like 6 times each.
Wow.
And the only reason I haven't done it as much with Inquisition is because it takes 100+ hours each time to finish it.
Yeah.
I have other games to play. But I started playing it again recently. My brain has been getting a little better, so I can finally start playing more games again. And I'm still playing it on like fairly simple mode. I'm playing as a mage, a knight enchanter. I'm not going to get too geeky. Anyway, it's a really easy class to play. You just go in and swing your magic sword. But it's very good. It's a lot of fun. I'm mostly playing it so that I can save the world, but I'm really there to romance one of the characters.
Oh, yeah.
You spend 100 hours like saving the world, but like a few hours is spent batting your eyelashes or kissing people. So that's my favorite part. It's super, super fun.
I love it. I love Dragon Age Inquisition. And this explains why Sherry picked it up again.
Oh, poor Sherry.
Because,
I've been talking to her incessantly. Been like, blah, 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 Dragon Age Inquisition.
Dan, what is giving you life?
What is giving me life? Since we are all largely confined to our homes, I have been doing a lot of cooking. I do all the cooking in my family anyway. But certainly at the beginning of stay at home, we were not going out at all. And so we counted it. I cooked 100 days in a row every year. And then I think day 100 was Father's Day. And they were like, maybe we can get takeout today. And I was like... Friends of ours recommended a cookbook. If I can geek out on computer games, but I can really geek out on cooking. This is a cookbook called Tuesday Nights. The idea is hard to make a good meal in the middle of the week because everyone's super busy. This cookbook is by Milk Street, which is the new venture by Christopher Kimball. If you are a cookbook nerd, as I am, you know Christopher Kimball from Cooks Illustrated. He was, I think, forced out of Cooks Illustrated or something
There
like
was a
that.
contract dispute, which was just actually settled like in the last month.
I had no idea you would know anything about that. That's all.
I have a massive Cooks Illustrated collection. I subscribe to the website. It
Amazing.
is my big thing.
So I'm not the biggest Christopher Kimball fan, but I really like this cookbook. I'm always reluctant to get a new cookbook because I can cook many meals without any recipe whatsoever. Like I've cultivated that. So I sort of resent new cookbooks, but my friends were really talking this one up. They were posting pictures to Instagram of the meals they were making. And my wife was like, let's just get this and try a few things.
Oh,
And
Instagram is so dangerous. Yeah.
really, it's organized. So the first 3 chapters are fast, faster, and fastest, which means it's organized in terms of like, how much time do you have to make something? Everything we've made out of it has been anywhere from like a solid 6 to a 9.5, like really, really good food and stuff that I can make in the middle of the week. So
Awesome.
That is giving me life.
I'm excited about this because I subscribed to Milk Street for a while, and those recipes in the magazine themselves were not fast nor easy to get stuff for. So I'm glad to hear that there is a cookbook from them that is taking that focus. So for me, what's giving me life is I listen to Audible books, and I love to listen to nonfiction. And they had a sale on great courses, which I listened to a bunch. And there's a great course called The Secrets of Great Mystery and Suspense Fiction. And it sounds like it's going to be like a how-to of how to write that. It is not at all. It is essentially a history of mystery and suspense fiction, and then it looks at topical things like Native American writers and Latin American writers and such, and, the femme fatale. It's really good, especially having been running Brindlewood Bay. It's been a delight to listen to. They're easy to get lectures. And I've learned a lot. Like, there's been a lot of things where I've noted about things, written down things I want to read now. Going through that has just been a real pleasure. So it's a good set of great courses. Listeners, that is our show. If you'd like to support the program, we have a Patreon at Patreon, I think, /Gauntlet that supports all of our podcast network as well as our online community. If you need to get a hold of us, you can reach out to us at Gauntlet RPG on Twitter. And we also have a website, gauntlet-rpg.com. If you come to this, you may know that we have the Gauntlet Calendar, which is an online gaming calendar. We have about 100 games each month on that. We've been doing now quarterly online events. That's also supported by the Patreon. But we also have a program called Gauntlet Gameway for people from marginalized communities, women, persons of color, LGBTQ, and people suffering from financial hardship who are looking for an online gaming community that focuses on stories and indie gamings and would like to get sort of RSVP priority. And you can contact us at gauntletcommunity@gmail.com if you're interested in that program. And you can check out the more details of that on gauntlet-rpg.com. Dan, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today.
Yeah, it was great having you, Dan.
I had so much fun. I wish I could do this every week.
I'm just so glad to have you here on the Gauntlet and on this podcast. And Jamie, thank you again for coming on and co-hosting again.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Always the highlight of my month.
Awesome. Listeners, that is our show.